Should I build my personal brand to amplify my company? Well, I've been asked that question a couple of hundred times over the last few years, and I kept finding myself throwing that question back at the person saying, can you build a personal brand? The question of should you build a personal brand comes after the question, can you build a personal brand? So on today's show, we're going to break down what personal brand is and qualify the can in that statement, which is, can I build a personal brand to amplify my company? By giving away a good checklist that you could run to actually answer that question. Stick around. This is going to be one hell of a show.
When you think that something as intangible as design and communications can't really affect your bottom line,
you usually end up with marketing and advertising tools that don't help you inherently mitigate your business risk.
that's what this podcast is about.
A behind-the-scenes look at how we go about doing what we do, mitigating business risk. I'm Jude Lazaro.
And I'm Mark Lazaro. And you are watching our weekly video podcast.
Today's going to be a fun episode because in today's world, with social media being where it is and being so accessible, personal brand is a topic that's on many people's minds. But one thing I'd like to clarify before we move on, you took the question, should I build my personal brand, and you twisted around and said, can you? I'm assuming, correct me if my interpretation is wrong, that the answer to should I is, duh, yeah, you should. But the real question is, can you?
Well, not yes and no, and that's kind of what I want to do before I get to the can I bit. We can approach this subject over quite a few episodes, and we will, because of precisely what you said. Social media at its peak, influencer marketing at its peak, and a lot of people wondering, can I build something out of this? It's kind of why I think the number of times that this question has been posed to me has just mathematically increased.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do is deep dive into, okay, I'm not going to scare anybody, I'm not going to deep dive. I've actually simplified this. So anyone who's done deep brand theory will probably, ask me, why did you oversimplify this? And the reason I'm oversimplifying it is because I want to give people a framework of thought where all of the meanings that we've thrown around, these words that we're throwing around, and this is kind of like a recurring theme here, where words like brand and words like personal brand or words like marketing have just been blown out of proportion. They don't mean what they actually mean anymore. So I wanted to kind of pass through a very simple construct where I run through what I would essentially call a quick reference of saying, what are the types of personal brands in the world? And do you know that there are different ones? Okay. And my list is not complete, and neither is it definitive. It is actually simple. The first thing that I wanted to explain was the concept of the fact that when you use the word personal, right, and I want to define the word personal, companies are not necessarily things that human beings relate to. So one of the biggest barriers between your company and your customer is the company itself. Because human beings like to talk to human beings. Yeah. Human beings relate to human beings. And this is a very, very, very basic concept. And a deep learning here is something that you could get from a TED Talk by a brilliant Indian neuroscientist called V.S. Ramachandran. And he has a TED Talk, I think, that's called The Neuron That Shaped a Civilization. We have this thing called a mirror neuron where we can experience what the other person is going through. And this is something that is new science. And it's something that should shape the way you think about what personal really is. Once you relate, you empathize. Now, why does a brand need to build empathy? The reason that a brand needs to build empathy is because you want to be forgiven. You're going to screw up. You're going to mess up.
Yes. Because you're still human.
Yeah. Exactly. Correct. So you're asking the wrong question here. Every brand, every company should have a personal brand representing it.
Choice.
The question is, how powerful is this personal brand? Where is this personal brand? Is it within the company? Is it outside the company? Is it not part of the company? Is it really small? Is it just an actor that you hired? Some actor, an unknown, because he had the right face,
the right persona.
The right persona. So personal brand is something that you and I have. That brings me to the second word that I want to define, and that is brand. The problem is everyone's tripping over this word semantically. Brand is an accumulation of trust. So anyone who's a brand expert out there, yes, you're going to throw crap at me. I told you, I am simplifying this for people because we've complicated it for them. You and I have complicated it for people.
Yes.
The simplicity of brand is, it's just a collection of trust. So let's do this. Let's qualify that we've now understood personal and human, and the fact that humans relate to humans. We've then qualified brand and said, remove the word brand. Forget about all the meanings that you've attached to it. Brand is a collection of trust. And then we finally made a bold statement of saying that everyone on the planet has a personal brand. So that brings me to the point of, why would you want to build a personal brand? So to qualify that word build, it's to build on a personal brand. It's to get more people to know you
and bring in more value to your brand.
Yeah.
So by build, you basically mean how do you increase the size of the circle of trust that you have and get it into bigger and bigger collections of people.
Beautifully put. Yeah? It is that. It's how do you amplify your circle of trust. But I'm going to now provide a framework which gives you some sense of, business-oriented reasoning to decide whether or not you should build a brand once you figure out that you can. Now, if I'm confusing you, stick around. I'm gonna solve this. I'm gonna solve the confusion for you. So let's get into what are the types of personal brands. The first one that I put down was an internal business owner who is the personal brand that drives and amplifies an organization or a company. A good example is Steve Jobs. He ended up building the world's largest brand in terms of market capitalization at some point. He's a great example of someone who's a personal brand within the company, who is leading the organization on product development and also leading the organization in terms of just direction. It's important to point this out here. This is before he died. I remember having this conversation with someone about a Forbes magazine article that had listed out the top 50 CEOs or top 20 CEOs or something of that sort. I'll try and find it and post a link to it. The conversation was very simple. I said, I started talking about Steve Jobs and the article in the Forbes, and we got off onto a big conversation. And then I just mentioned the surname Bezos. And this guy looks up at me and goes, who's that? And I go, you don't know who Jeff Bezos is? And he goes, who's Jeff Bezos? I said, he's the second most successful CEO in the world according to this Forbes magazine article. And he goes, oh, who is he? I said, he's the guy who built Amazon. He's like, oh, I know Amazon. So imagine at that time.
How long back is
it? Just a few years. I mean, it's like, okay, less than a decade ago, right? Yeah. People didn't know who Jeff Bezos was.
Correct.
And now, in comparison, obviously, if you read into it, I'm not putting it down to Jobs overshining Bezos because you can't do that. But ideally, at some point in time, I think Jeff possibly, I don't know if someone from Amazon can clarify this, did he take an active choice to build and amplify his personal brand?
Yeah.
He possibly did.
He's certainly in the forefront.
Yeah, because it moved beyond just e-commerce and books. It became Amazon became this much larger platform, and it needed an entity to be able to again create that human connection and
hold up the brand.
And hold up the brand, prop it up. Now moving on, Elon Musk, fantastic example of an internal personal brand, completely involved in product development and the direction of the business. And he is not propping up one, he's propping up multiple brands. He's propping up multiple crazy ideas, as a matter of fact. I mean, the Hyperloop or this new, the boring company that he's formed. It's just crazy thought, and he's propping it up. Now, a great anecdote here for Musk that I'll prop out is when I think they were taking the Model S over to Europe, right, and introducing it into the European market. And I think they propped up against a problem where the European financial institutions that were going to provide insurance for these cars had some issue with them. So they were like, I don't know, is it going to be, are we going to give it? This man stands up at a press conference and says, apart from all of the fact that I've presented to you, which shows you that we are a solid organization, Tesla and this car, we know what we're doing. He says, I'm going to put my personal guarantee behind every Model S sold in Europe. That's strong. So now you realize what a personal brand can do. Because if you haven't heard of Musk, then you're not from planet Earth right now. At least you're not from the connected planet Earth. But if you have, you know how influential this man is. Because if you trace back 15, 20 years and you look at what he's been doing, he's been steadily building personal brand because he knows that At some level, personal brand is what can prop up a ridiculous idea. And he has a lot of them. And then what he's been doing is making his companies qualify those ideas.
Absolutely. No, which makes every new audacious idea an idea that is believable now, because it's coming out from his mouth, and he's built so much trust in the entire the entire planet.
Yeah.
For you to believe in the fact that he can do it.
And
no, I guess no conversation about personal brand could have been.
I could not have avoided these.
Elon Musk. Yeah.
I could not have avoided these obvious names. Now I'm going to move on. Another great example of internal to the company type personal brand is the personification of brand. There's no human involved. There's a trade character involved. Yeah. Great example, powerful man just like the people that I just mentioned, Walt Disney.
Correct.
Fiery character who drove the innovation that is Disney. At some point in time, he knew that he could not be the face of Disney, and he handed it off to Mickey. Mickey's a powerful brand. And if you think about Mickey and those two black ears, the personification of a mouse, it is the embodiment of everything Disney. Trade characters are a great example of internal personal brands. Now, this is where I flip over and I move to the second classification, which is you have an external personal brand. Now, this is something that I think everyone's going to be familiar with. You, the company, don't have a personal brand or even a personification that you can use to connect with a human being outside. So you borrow on somebody else's power. Great examples: Shah Rukh Khan, Amitabh Bachchan, Aishwarya Rai, Marky Mark, George Clooney, whoever that be. All of your celebrities are ripe external personal brands that companies go and latch onto and use. The biggest difference, if I'm making the point here, between an internal personal brand and an external personal brand is the fact that you part with cash. It costs you money. You need to pay someone to do this. And that's an excellent segue to talk about a modern phenomenon, which is the influencer.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And social media going where it is. I think a lot of the people that asked me this question either wanted to clarify whether they could buy into an influencer or whether they could be an influencer. There's no confusion here. It's the same thing. It's still personal brand, and instead of a celebrity, you're buying into someone who's got slightly smaller
maybe domain knowledge.
Yeah. And the difference between a celebrity and this person is the fact that the personal in brand is always there, no matter which way you swing this bat and what you call it, whether you call it influencer or not. It's about a human connecting with a human. His reach is incidental. It's also there, which is what the should question is. So we'll talk about that. The third type of classification of personal brand that I put down is a personal brand that is the brand. Confusing?
No, elaborate.
Any major musical artist. They are the brand.
Basically, they are the product they're selling.
They are the product that they're selling. They're selling themselves and the music that they're producing. Yes, the music could be technically called the qualifier, but if you think about it, a lot of the large corporations behind any of these big musical giants
put themselves second.
This is not Columbia Records, is John Mayer.
Correct.
Right? It's John Mayer.
Yeah.
His brand is way bigger because it is the product.
Correct.
So that's the question that possibly just gets answered right here. If you are the product that you're selling, there's no choice that you have to build a personal brand. You have to. You are the brand.
No, but that kind of reminds me of maybe a bit of a sub-classification within this. If you look at bands like Daft Punk and Sia, they've literally created a trade character version for their own personal brands.
Oh, interesting. Yes, they have.
They? Yeah, because.
But here's the beauty of it. Even though you just brought this conversation up and everyone might think we're in the third classification, you just brought up the first classification.
Correct.
It's personification.
Yeah.
Sia, great example. Anyone with a black and white wig is the brand. If you think about it, from what I know, both the guys behind Daft Punk and Sia, they both didn't want the fame.
Yeah.
They didn't want the pressure that came with the fame, right? And that's the can and should question. Yeah. So stick around. I'm getting to that point. A big problem that you could pop into here and ask yourself is, which one do I need? Do I need an internal personal brand? Do I need an external personal brand? Am I the brand? All these questions could come up. Now this is the should in your question. It honestly isn't an answer that I can clarify on a podcast of this sort. It's something that you need to sit down and talk about. It's the equivalent of me coming and telling you, hey Jude, so I heard that if I challenge Usain Bolt to a race, I can get famous and build a personal brand. You think I should do you think I should do this? What's the first thing you're going to ask me?
Can you beat Hussein?
Why did you say that?
Yeah, because you need capability to do it.
Right. So there is a genetic problem, right? First of all, Usain Bolt is a genetic freak. There's no way that even if I trained, I'm going to go up against him. So there was some qualifier there. And that's
Unless
why
there's something special about you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying me. This is me.
No.
No, this is me. I'm definitely not going to outrun Usain Bolt.
Correct.
That's why you asked me the question, Can. If you came into this episode thinking about personal brand as something that you thought you should or shouldn't build, and then bumped into the word can because I threw it at you, and now I'm going to qualify that by giving you a little checklist that you can run down and answer the question can, which then qualifies you to move on to the question should you. So here's what I've done. I've broken this down into a checklist which has about 4 parts, basically 4 parts. And the first part is a bunch of questions you can ask yourself that revolve around the word personality. All right, so the first question you want to ask yourself is, are you articulate?
Okay.
Do you speak well? Because if you're building a personal brand, that's something that's really important.
Yeah.
The second question, and this gets a little personal, is, are you physically comfortable with what you look
Correct.
like? Are you comfortable with what you look? Are you comfortable with what you sound like?
Oh, yeah.
I know a ton of people that come out for recording with me and go, hey, I sound like that.
Yeah.
And then you go, are you comfortable with what you sound like? Then, in this day and age, are you comfortable in front of a camera?
Correct.
Like, are you comfortable just turning to a camera and having a conversation with the camera?
How many people have you seen who are very articulate and
I love the fact that you just bombed there. It's superb. Okay, in this day and age, you can't avoid the being on camera. You just can't. It's not an option. So these are things that you need to be comfortable with. And these are very personal questions, especially the ones about body image or, self-confidence and things of that sort. These are things these are disqualifiers immediately. And like you were saying, I think the point that we're trying to make was, we've met so many people that when you sit with them, for an hour or two, are deep, meaningful people.
Yeah.
But they're just not confident enough to take that out and share it with the world. They've got great personal brand one-on-one with you, but they can't build it. They can't amplify it.
Unless they
and it's a
overcome
crutch.
that.
Yeah, unless they can
crutch.
overcome
Yeah.
that. So this is literally, you need a coach to be able to take this through. You need to be able to be coached into this. But also before that, the reason for this checklist is ask yourself these questions, because they're really, really difficult ones. Now moving on, this is stuff that I don't think anyone talks about. It's, have you factored in the fact that if you start to do this in this day and age, there's a lot of invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
A lot of your life now, becomes
Public domain.
Public domain. And a great example of this was something that we were joking about just a couple of weeks ago, where Elon Musk posts a picture of Amber Heard on his Instagram feed, and the world loses its mind, because all they've seen on his feed until that point are rockets and cars and this and that and returned vehicles and impossible shots that look like a rocket video that's been reversed.
Yeah.
Played in reverse. And then they go, he just posted a picture of a girl that planted lipstick on his face. That's how invasive personal brand is.
Because we were all judgmental.
The world became judgmental, man. It went off. I mean, post a bunch of links about, the media went crazy. Here's my personal take on it. If there was any doubt about whether this man was an android or someone from the future or whatever it be, that one post for me clarified that he's human.
Correct.
And that's the personal in brand.
Yeah.
So this concept, again, I think, okay, how many times have we used brand in the episode till now? Can somebody count and put up like a number? Brands. And the brand is brand. Brands a brand. Yeah. Are you willing to put in the work? Because it's a lot of work.
It's a daily laborious task.
It's the reason that if you don't do it, like if you don't build personal brand, you have to pay someone else to do it. Mm-hmm. The cost is higher. Building a personal brand is much more expensive. It's the expenses, it takes a toll on you. Are you willing to put that work in? Talk to someone who's doing it, or go and look at people who've built personal brands and try and get a glimpse into how difficult their lives are. And the last two are, you have to ask yourself a question: does your personality is this thing that you are, this person that you are, the trust that you've built, does it have any connection with your company that you've built? Like, have you built a company that glove fits with you as a person? Because if you're going to prop that thing up, there has to be a connection there. And I can qualify this with a simple question of, what is your version of controversy? Like, what controversy are you going to bring to the table? Like, take Jobs. His fiery attitude was his controversy. Everything else aligned with his brand. Everything else aligned with his brand. Because he was building it. It was him. But his controversy was his attitude. His so-called attitude. Or I never met the man, but yeah. And that's the question that I'm asking. So that's the final thing on the personality list that you should check off.
What controversy can you bring to the table?
What controversy do you bring to the table? Don't try and cause controversy here. There's enough people doing that. What controversy do you naturally bring to the table? Moving on to the next subset on this checklist, I've kind of poetically used the word language to classify it, and the reason is that I just couldn't find a better word to qualify these statements. So the first one is, do you actually speak their language? And I mean this literally. Now, as homework, I'm going to pop off this video that I had, that I bumped into of Lee Kuan Yew talking about or answering a question that was posed to him by, I think, a member of the Indian press contingent somewhere in Singapore. And he says, he praises him for being one of the only nation builders of our time and things of that sort. And then he moves on to say, if you were given India, what would you do to govern it? And I'd leave the answer to, go and watch the video. It's in the show notes. But what's worth mentioning here is the fact that Lee Kuan Yew's response is centered around the fact that we are a country of many languages. And of course, I'm not getting political here, but he says, listen, you're a manufactured state with that many people that speak that many languages. And he goes off into statistics. And he says, do you think that you can find one man who can speak all of these languages? So this is a very important qualifier, because in the Indian context, it's important to understand that. It's really, really important to understand that. How many times have we hit upon advertising problems where language is a barrier and we didn't know how to deal with it, or brands itself were a little uncomfortable about how to deal with it. If you're building a company that's heading straight into, into a multilingual, kind of environment, you probably should be asking a very, very deep question at this point here. Can I do it? And the next point on my checklist is, who's your market? Who are you selling to? Do you one-on-one relate to them? And I have a great example here, because if language was a barrier, then here's what unchecks that box for you. If you are the center of the product, or you're really, really connected with the product, all of those barriers will fall off.
You mean like an Apex user?
An Apex user. Oh, we should qualify that. There's two perfect people that can start a brand or start a company. On one extreme, you have what's called an Apex user. This is someone who is the most qualified user for that product, the most qualified customer. On the other end is someone who has spent their lifetime building expertise in that field. So if you qualify on both these extremes, you are the perfect founder, because you're the one who's defining the use of the product, or you're the one who knows how to build the product. So these are the two extremes of that scale. You've got the super user, and then you've got the expert. Now, what if you qualify on both fronts? Now, I've chosen someone who I think is an excellent example of a super founder, and he's Hugh. Herr. He's an American rock climber, engineer, and biophysicist. He is the head of the biomechatronics research group at the MIT Media Lab. His life story starts as a mountain climber. He's a phenomenal mountain climber who, during an accident, is trapped and I think gets frostbite, and both of his legs are amputated. Guess what he's doing today? He's heading up a research team that's building the world's most advanced bionic limbs. Now, you don't qualify on both ends. He's the guy doing it. So he's the one with the knowledge. He's also the one because he doesn't have with the need. Now, if you qualify at that level, the trust level that you would have in Hugh now, and I'm going to share a TED talk that he did, and there's a moment where he's sitting opposite a girl who'd lost her leg. And I was just imagining in my head, how would that meeting have gone? Imagine a person walks in and you've devastated because you've lost one leg. He walks in, he's lost both of his legs.
Yeah.
What a connection with that. That's fantastic connection. And that's where the word language now crosses the barrier of just language in terms of spoken, and it moves on to, are you speaking the language of the heart? Like when I meet you, boom, I connect with you.
Yeah.
Now if you're that person for your brand because your product is related in that way to you, then you have no choice. You should build a personal brand. You've already built one. You just need to amplify it.
Okay.
Or you need to build on it. So moving on to the third classification, I've chosen to call it culture. And this is where personal bias to some extent may be playing into this, but this is how I feel about it. The first one is, take an internal personal brand like Richard Branson, right? He's a maverick. Now, yes, he built all of these companies, but unlike, say, an Elon Musk or unlike a Steve Jobs, was not such a huge part of most of the brands he built. Like, think about it. What was the one-on-one connection with, a relatable connection with his airline? So what he did was he chose to take something that he was good at, which was taking personal physical risk, and he built on that, and that's kind of why he's known. And he used that to manifest and amplify, a lot of the companies that he built under the Virgin Group. He, as a person in the European culture, is revered because traditionally, I think Europeans kind of celebrate their adventurers. Just culturally, I think it's built into them because it's kind of how they left the island and they went and found wealth and all of that. Now, on the flip side, I want to talk about an Indian, that's again a powerful personal brand leading a conglomerate that he doesn't have any direct connect with. Like, he's not the apex user. And that's Ratan Tata, who I think, on a personal level, I think he's a prince. I mean, just the way he acts and his demeanor. And in India, we look up to our princes. Or do we? Because of the lineage of, kind of feudal systems that have, plagued this land, I think we also, at some level, we kind of take people of authority or people that have risen a bit and we knock them down. So if you're someone who's building a personal brand and you feel like you're getting knocked around, shake it off, move on. It's just part of our culture.
So you always end up with this love and hate relationship.
It's a love-hate relationship with the leader in this space. And when you build a personal brand, you are building yourself up and you're putting yourself on a pedestal. And be aware of the culture that you work within.
So I think even, any cultural biases aside, the fact that you're putting yourself up on some sort of a pedestal and bringing attention to yourself, you will attract negative attention, and you've got to take that with a pinch of salt. You've got to develop a thick skin.
Yeah, and the reason that I put these two people and this conversation and put it into a box that I called culture, was I said, look back at the cultural makeup of the people that you're going to be, you're going to be working with. This is when you've passed through the first three, subsets of questions, and you've understood that the question of whether or not you should build a personal brand, because by now you know that you have one, whether you should build it. If I'm confusing you, amplify it, grow it, take that circle of trust, expand it. If you now qualify on all those fronts and you're comfortable with all of the negatives that come with it, all of the hard work that comes with it, the biggest question that you should be asking yourself right now is, does your business need it? And that's when the should pops back into the question. Should you build a brand? Now, most companies are never going to be global giants, but even global giants like Apple and Tesla and Virgin were successful when they took a personal brand and used it to amplify. The question of whether or not you want to build one personally, that's just you building the brand. If you're the leader of that company, the question is honestly it's all in your head. You need to get comfortable with it. You need to get comfortable with all of the questions that I posed just now, because you have no choice. Your company is not relatable. You're going to have to plant a human being in there to connect with that. So the should in this question connects with how much is it going to cost you.
How so?
It's going to cost you. If it's internally, it's going to be personal cost, time, effort. If it's external, you're going to have to pay someone. And you're never going to have a pure version of this. Even Apple, with the strong brand that personal brand that Jobs was, leaned on a whole lot of other personal brands down the line, external personal brands that they were paying small monies to. So you're never going to get a perfect, mix of, oh, I built the personal brand and this is how the company is going to relate to me. So all of these flavors are, relevant, whether it be Hugh, Her's, perfect connection, because he didn't have two legs, and he's just.
And he had the technical know-how to do it.
He had the technical know-how to do it. So all of these things are qualifiers and dequalifiers in the same right. And you have to be, one, you've got to do your research. Number two, you've got to be very, very, very honest with yourself. And more so, we're living in a time where we're kind of leaving the industrial revolution behind, and we're moving into a knowledge economy. I think brands, no matter how big or small they are going to need an kind of like a revival of personal connect. And you want to be able to know who's behind companies of this sort. Gone are the days where you could hide behind large conglomerates and be this CEO that nobody knew. Only my employees know that I exist. Those are the kind of companies that are going to start to see themselves fall off the charts. This is such a juicy subject. We can just go on and on and on. But I want to kind of conclude by saying we've fundamentally kind of shattered a few misnomers about the fact that brand is trust, that everyone has a personal brand. But the question is not should you build a personal brand. You already have one. The question is should you build it. So, do you think we sound a little preachy?
Well, it's difficult to not come across preachy with a topic like this, right? It's got so many facets, and you can't just, even though we're trying our best to simplify it, it is multidimensional. Yes. And which is why we decided to take this topic and stretch it to next week's episode as well. We're going to be meeting up and having a chat with a close friend now, but a person who met us a year and a half ago, and he was at that same crossroads where he was deciding whether or not to have a personal brand. And eventually he took the decision to do it. And we helped him along the way. It's a great place to meet somebody who's taken that step and decided to build and amplify his personal brand. Extremely,
I have to wait till next week to get to know who this is. Yeah,
typical TV serial style.
Yeah, we're actually doing a homage to how to some of the material that we produced for him. Yeah. So you'll get to see all of that, and you get to talk, and we'll actually literally run down some points in the checklist with him, and you get a kind of personal take on it. So this is someone who's doing this, someone who's actually kind of dealing with this problem right now.
So firstly, like this video and also subscribe so you can be notified when next week's video comes up, and have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Right. Makes sense?
Yeah.
That brings me to the...
What he's talking about. No, let's do it again.